Right. So what I'd like to offer is a reflection on some things from David's offering around rest, and two things in particular that he says. And then those evoked in me two lineages that have been powerful in my own life. So the one reference he makes actually several times in the reading is to this living exchange, this kind of breathing between inside and outside, and how what is within me flows to what is outside of me, and this kind of template of the breath itself, this inhale, exhale. So David touches on that in a couple of ways and links it with the experience of rest and deep rest being a time of openness to this exchange that's going on between the inner forces and the external realities. Um, and his language around it is quite beautiful. So that brings up a teaching that comes from the Circle of Trust lineage from Parker Palmer. And so I want to share that with you. You might have been exposed to it if you've been around Parker's teachings at all. And the other one I would like to explore is this. David also talks about rest as a place where we find our way home and we return back with memory to a destination, to a place that's familiar to us. So, this language of connection to home. And that's very much wayfinding language. That's traditional open ocean navigating language. And I've been fortunate to have spent time with some Hawaiian navigators and spent time in the Hawaiian Islands learning from them. So I want to touch base a little bit about home navigation and what it means to reference my life from a connection to home, from the wayfinding tradition, which again is, I think, deep memory for all of us as hunter gatherers. So, so let me begin with inside outside. Um, Parker calls this his Quaker PowerPoint because it's just a piece of paper. And so this Quaker PowerPoint demonstration is quite simple, but you basically take a strip of paper like this, and on one side I wrote, I don't know if you can see the words, it says inner. Can you see that? Whoa.
Yeah.
Inner. And then on the other side it says outer. The teaching begins with, myself as a baby and who I was on the inside and who I was on the outside. There was no issue because it was all flowing. And there was just a reality to my life being this flow between um, the inner life and the outer life. But then something happens as we age, as definitely as we go through experiences like being socialized in school and in families. Some of us have to figure this out very, very young if we come from difficult family situations, how to survive, how to protect the inner life. And that's when the Quaker PowerPoint comes in handy because then it becomes an understanding that this is my inner experience, which is hidden away. And this is what you see, the outer Dan, outer reality of who I am. And this is a very painful schism, very painful separation, a hiding of the inner in order to be outside who I need to be. And sometimes when I teach this in a retreat setting, we'll write a bunch of things on this side. And on the outer side, I would write how I'm seen. Am I impressing others? Am I being effective? Am I getting things done? But it's more to do with image and how I'm seen in the world. But it also is what I accomplish. It's also more than that. And then the inner side, this would be more who I am when there's no one else around, when I'm really free to be deep in solitude. And this is when I tap into my imagination, my creativity, my more authentic self, when I'm not having to perform or having to impress anyone or prove anything to anyone. This is my freedom just to be in the inner life. And then Parker says this wonderful thing that happens as we mature, and that is we become centered. There's like a plumb line that comes down the middle of our lives, and so the outer is informed by the inner experience. But he says this is still a limited way to live in the world because it's still a protective wall. It's still a gated community. There's still certain things and certain ideas and beliefs that are held in the inner that are contained here. And then the outer is also not deeply informed by the inner life. It's better than this kind of really divided life, but it still has its limitations. And then the magic of what's called the Mobius strip, which is a wonderful mathematical, geometric, fascinating figure. But if this circle is broken and life will break us, and you give one twist to it like this and then reattach it, it creates a very complex form. And it's hard to sort of see it on, but if there's the outer, and there is what was the inner. And if you actually trace it, if you go around what was the outer, it becomes what was the inner. And what was the inner becomes what was the outer. This is when I'm more integrated and mature. This is what I've been striving towards, to see my life as flowing between what is happening within myself and bringing that into my life so that it's true on the outside. And then all the external impacts, I take them into my life. They co-inform, and there's a free flow, not a harsh separation, not a protection, but an openness for the inner and the outer to be true to one another. So this is exactly this Mobius strip. This is exactly what David's going to describe in terms of rest. Parker would just call this maturity and growth and coming into full adulthood, but this is also um, an image of rest tonight. Okay, so that was the one teaching I want to share with you from the Mobius strip and this inner and outer co-informing. The other one was this returning home imagery. In open ocean navigating, traditional navigating with no maps, no compass, no charts, no GPS, no satellites. All you have to rely on is memory. And one of the important things when you're navigating, whether it's from island to island or whether it's from on land, from waterhole to waterhole, it's to constantly be aware of where did you leave from, and that place being the connection to home, to a place that you belong to. I come from a ranching family, and my dad, my grandfather, they moved sheep and cattle by horseback. And my dad told me stories of in a big fog or really heavy snow, you're out there and you're not exactly sure sometimes where you are. And it's easy to get lost, especially if you're in a new area that you haven't been to very often. And you learn to really trust the horse. The horse knows exactly how it got there. The horse has known the whole time where home was. And you don't override the horse. You trust it. This is also true for like dog sled teams. This is also true for most animals that move around. They learn very quickly something called path integration. They learn to, this is why, by the way, bees do this. This is why we call it a beeline, because bees go out and they fly around and they go from flower to flower to flower to flower, but they always know the direct path back to the hive. They fly straight back with no deviation because they've memorized, and they've also used the sun, and they use all sorts of other navigational skills, but they stay true to home. And in the ocean travels, the wayfinders, they did the same thing. They never broke the connection with the home island. So even when they were way out, far out into sea, and there's wonderful stories of this when European contact takes place. But these traditional navigators always retained the connection to back home, no matter what islands they visited, went to, how far out they were in the ocean. They always knew what direction home was and how far away it was. They maintained that connection, that tether. And all spiritual practice is this remembering memory, uh, knowing the way back, remembering the way back, reconnecting. So we're going to see that show up in this reading of rest. It's going to be one of the steps of rest that David's going to talk about in the progression. And now what I want to do is take these two teachings, these two metaphors, the Mobius strip inside outside and home navigating, and then just hear them arise from the reading now from David. And I'm going to put the reading up on the screen, and then I would love for someone to read it for us. Let me just share my screen. You should see that rest. And I'd love for someone to be our reader tonight and who would feel comfortable and feels a prompting to go ahead and read this aloud.
Dan, I'll start and read a couple paragraphs. But
Sure. Thanks, Sloan. Appreciate that.
Rest is the conversation between what we love to do and how we love. Rest is the essence of giving and receiving, an act of remembering, imaginatively and intellectually, but also psychologically and physically. To rest, what is to rest? To rest is to give up on the already exhausted will as the prime motivator of endeavor, with its endless outward need to reward itself through established goals. I'll read one more. To rest is to give up on worrying and fretting, in the sense that there's something wrong with the world unless we are there to put it right.
Thanks, Sloan. And another reader to pick it up from there.
To rest is to fall back, literally or figuratively, from our outer targets and shift the goal not to an inner static bullseye and imagined state of perfect stillness, but to an inner state of natural exchange. The template of natural exchange is the breath. The autonomic giving and receiving that forms the basis and the measure of life itself. We are rested when we are a living exchange between what lies inside, what lies outside, when we are an integrating conversation between the potential that lies in our imagination and the possibilities for making that internal image real in the world. We are rested when we let things alone and let ourselves alone to do what we do best, breathe as the body intended us to breathe, to walk as we were meant to walk, to live with the rhythm of a house and a home, giving and taking through cooking and cleaning. When we give and take in an easy, fundamental way, we are closest to the authentic self, and closest to that self when we are most rested.
Thanks, Dan. And invite another voice to jump in now.
I can go. Still.
Thanks, Jill.
To rest is not self-indulgent. To rest is to prepare to give the best of ourselves, and to perhaps most importantly, arrive at a place where we are able to understand what we have already been given. In the first state of rest is the sense of stopping, of giving up on what we have been doing or how we have been doing. In the second is the sense of slowing coming home, the physical journey into the body's uncoerced and unbullied self, as if trying to remember the way or even the destination itself. In the third state is a sense of healing and self-forgiveness and of arrival. In the fourth state, deep in the primal exchange of the breath, is the give and the take, the blessing and the being blessed, and the ability to delight in both. In the fifth stage is a sense of absolute readiness and presence, a delight in and an anticipation of the world and all its forms, a sense of being the meeting itself between inner and outer, and that receiving and responding occur in one spontaneous movement. A deep experience of rest is the template of perfection in the human imagination, a perspective from which we are able to perceive the outer specific forms of our work and our relationships, whilst being nourished by the shared foundational gift of the breath itself. From this perspective, we can be rested while putting together an elaborate meal for an arriving crowd, whilst climbing the highest mountain or sitting at home surrounded by the chaos of a loving family. Rested, we are ready for the world, but not held hostage by it. Rested, we care again for the right things and the right people in the right way. In rest, we establish the goals that make us more generous, more courageous, more of an invitation, someone we want to remember, and someone others would want to remember too.
Thanks, Jill. So let me offer a couple of questions. This is a question I've been asking myself. What gets in the way of my finding rest? What gets in the way of rest? Or you could say what prevents me from resting, or what blocks me from resting, or what is it that makes rest difficult at times? And then referring back both to the reading about rest, but also to the poem sometimes. What do I need to stop? And what do I need to give up on doing? What do I need to stop and give up on doing? So what gets in the way of finding rest? What do I need to stop and give up on doing? Okay, I'm going to leave these questions up on the screen so you've got them. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes of time to have some, just a bit of a depth sounding and just to see what's arising in response to David's reading around rest. Maybe a scan just of how rested you are tonight coming into this meeting. Maybe those 5 steps of rest are speaking to you on some level. But it can be these questions or whatever else is showing up for you. Okay. So let me go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. I'll do that after we have about 10 minutes of time. So let's go ahead and use the time right now. If you want to turn your cameras off, that's fine, and mute yourself so it's quiet. And then you'll hear my voice and see me come back on the screen. And that'll be the sign that we're coming back from the 10 minutes time. Okay, so this is your time. And one last thing. If you need permission from somebody to not look at your phones or get wrapped up into something else that's going on in the home you're in, and just to really rest and to stop and to be present for yourself, I'll glad to be the person to extend that permission to you for this 10 minutes of time. Okay. See you in a bit.